Okay, so we're going to convene our first panel. I would like to invite Arthur Howe. I would like to invite Tom Aboud, Peter Turpening, and Joan Gregerson up. While they're assembling, I'm going to go ahead and show you the first, the inspiration for this session, a little thing to think about.
If you've learned a lot about leadership and making a movement, then let's watch a movement happen start to finish in under 3 minutes and dissect some lessons. First, of course, a leader needs the guts to stand alone and look ridiculous. But what he's doing is so simple, it's almost instructional. This is key. You must be easy to follow. Now here comes the first follower with a crucial role. He publicly shows everyone else how to follow. Notice how the leader embraces him as an equal. So it's not about the leader anymore, it's about them, plural. Notice how he's calling to his friends to join in. So it takes guts to be a first follower. You stand out and you brave ridicule yourself. Being a first follower is an underappreciated form of leadership. The first follower transforms a lone nut into a leader. If the leader is the flint, the first follower is the spark that really makes the fire. Now here's the second follower. This is a turning point. It's proof the first has done well. Now it's not a lone nut and it's not two nuts. 3 is a crowd and a crowd is news. A movement must be public. Make sure outsiders see more than just the leader. Everyone needs to see the followers because new followers emulate followers, not the leader. Now here come 2 more people, then 3 more immediately. Now we've got momentum. This is the tipping point and now we have a movement. As more people jump in, it's no longer risky. If they were on the fence before, there's no reason not to join in now. They won't stand out, they won't be ridiculed, and they will be part of the in crowd if they hurry. And over the next minute you'll see the rest who prefer to stay part of the crowd, because eventually they'd be ridiculed for not joining. And ladies and gentlemen, that is how a movement is made. So let's recap what we've learned. If you are a version of the shirtless dancing guy, all alone, remember the importance of nurturing your first few followers as equals, making everything clearly about the movement, not you. Be public, be easy to follow. But the biggest lesson here, did you catch it? Leadership is overglorified. Yes, it started with the shirtless guy, and he'll get all the credit, but you saw what really happened. It was the first follower that transformed a lone nut into a leader. There's no movement without the first follower. See, we're told that we all need to be leaders, but that would be really ineffective. The best way to make a movement, if you really care, is to courageously follow and show others how to follow. When you find a lone nut doing something great, have the guts to be the first person to stand up and join in.
Okay, it turns out our work is a team sport. And to further that, we have assembled a fantastic panel. And we're going to start with Arthur, who you saw in one of the videos. Arthur is coming to us from Mountain View Methodist. They've done an incredible amount of work. And I'm going to go ahead and get his slide loaded.
Well, that is really an incredible movie, and one which we should have ingrained in our minds as to how we go through this process. And thinking back to 2009, that is actually what happened at Mountain View, surprisingly. We had one person who was the passionate leader of the Green Team, and she had a contact with an Excel employee, and the Excel employee said, hey, you can get a good rebate if you go through your lighting system and upgrade it. And of course, initially that seemed like too much work. We had a huge number of lights, but more and more people said, yeah, well, perhaps we could do that. And the momentum started to grow, just like they showed in the movie. And people realised that, boy, if we do this, it's hardly going to cost us anything up front because of the Excel rebates, and it's going to reduce our power consumption, which is good, and we can start going green. So we finally got 30 volunteers. Is that coming through okay? 30 volunteers who worked over 17 work days spread over about 6 months, and they replaced all 492 of our fluorescent tubes and all our incandescent light bulbs. And this was recognised with a plaque which is hung in our church narthex. And people could see the reduction in the electricity usage, which surprised them really, because you think of light bulbs as, just a small consumer of electricity. But in our church, with lots of them, you can see from 2010 to 2011, there was a significant drop in the electricity consumption. So this gave us support for the process. This is something we can do. This is something that there are lots of people who can contribute their skills to make happen. And it laid the groundwork for the next stage, which actually was initiated by the same person, the passionate leader of the Green Team, Mary Beth Downing, there she is there. And the Excel employee who, again, was a contact for the way in which Excel rebates could help reduce the cost of installing solar panels. Soon, the chair of trustees, which happened to be myself at the time, got involved, and we had an expert who worked at NIST who was familiar with the solar installations and the calculations involved. And fortunately, very fortunately, the chair of finance also was a green supporter, and he had been the chief economist of the Public Utility Commission for 10 years. So he knew the ins and outs of how the electricity costing was worked out. So here's the team, and that team worked through many working groups to develop a plan which we put before people. The pastor got involved. It went to church council. They thought in principle this was good. So it went to the all-church conference, which all the members of the church get to vote. 60,000. But we weren't there. We knew what rebates we could get. We knew what rebates we couldn't get. We didn't have enough large contributors to form an LLC, but we thought we had lots of people in the church who would contribute a small amount. So I remember sitting in this meeting, and there was a time deadline on this because the renewable energy credits were reducing month by month, and we could see them coming down. And this was a critical part of the rebate system. And the longer we waited, the more money we'd have to put up front to pay for it because of the reduction in the renewable energy credits. So we set a deadline. We said, we've got to have the money, and it was about 6 weeks off. And how can we do this? We've got to get 24,000. And somebody said, well, let's just tell the church we need to raise 24,000 by this time or the whole project has dropped. So we said, well, let's offer people to support a panel for a nominal $400. And let's see if we can get 60 of those to do that. So we put it out to the church, and it happened. By the date, we had more than 60 supporters, 60 donors for the panels, and eventually we got up to 100. So it was oversubscribed, which meant that we could actually reduce our mortgage. So there's the solar system. For its continued maintenance and oversight, we set up a standing committee, which is basically these people, to monitor it and make sure that it's functioning properly technically, and that the finances are coming through and the savings are coming through in the way in which we had predicted. And all of that's been true. It's worked technically faultlessly, and we save, just from the solar system, about $9,000 a year. And I'll tell you how we get more savings later on and how we've progressed in our green work. You can go to mountainview.org/green to see that movie if you wish to, and to get further information. And I've left some handouts on the table which have further technical information if you're interested in following that up.
Okay, thank you, Arthur. And we're going to... So in this facility, this church, there was a really important piece of work that preceded the actual implementation. And we are going to hear from Tom Aboud, who is a member here, who drove this green sanctuary work, which is so powerful. It should become the open source template for congregations doing their greening work. So I want to thank you, Tom, and present you. Let's get your slides up. Ooh. Uh-oh. Where are they? Oh. Okay.
All right. Thank you, David, and welcome. Good morning to everybody. And it really takes a group effort, a village. You do need a couple of passionate individuals to lead, but you really need to create a lot of synergy and energy within your congregation. And I'll give you a few examples of what we did here at First U to really move forward. So I think within all of our congregations, what is that North Star? What is that mission, purpose? What is our congregation all about? Now, the UUs have our seventh principle, and that was a great principle to rally the troops around, and it's basically, as you see, respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. Now, I have personally changed respect to reverence because I don't feel respect is enough. I think reverence for the interdependent web of all existence. If we don't have love and we don't have awe of what we are a part of, then what are we going to do? Just respect? And so, and I have not been excommunicated yet. So, but I think it's important when you are energizing and putting a group together, and I love this from Naomi Klein, basically on This Changes Everything. Too often we think of our social justice, environmental justice, economic justice, all in silos. That, we're doing this over here, you're doing this, and you've got a lot of great people doing stuff, but it's really all connected. And that's one thing we really looked at here is that we need to connect the dots and we need to expand. It's not just about energy nerds putting solar on a roof. It's really about how do we create a better world? And in order to do that, you've got to branch out and include everybody within the social justice arenas within your congregation. Now, the UUA has a Green Sanctuary Accreditation program, and it is a significant program. And we worked on this from 2008 to 2010. And once again, it's not in any one area. You do a deep dive in worship and celebration, religious education, sustainable living, and environmental justice. And what we had to do is basically do an audit to see where we were at in each one of those areas and then move forward with action plans from there. So it's a monumental task. So where do you get started? How do you get the team together? So as I say, you really need to diversify that team, and you really need to get buy-in from a lot of different people. So we reached out throughout the congregation, and everyone has leaders within their congregation. You call on them. We worked with our ministers, our staff, religious education, and basically all the members and all the social justice activities that were going on, and say, hey, are you interested in coming on board and helping with the Green Sanctuary Accreditation movement? Really important to come up with a name. We actually spent a lot of time on the name Green First Task Force. Went through a lot of different things, but we settled on a name, and then we came up with a logo, which is what you see up in the upper right. And that really creates, I think, a much more bonding and identity. And then from there, we were able to really, we are an entity within the church to really move this forward. And we probably had around 15 people that were pretty engaged. Life gets in the way for a lot of people, so you've got people coming and going, but a really good nucleus of people that we could call upon to move forward, because 2 years is a pretty long period of time to keep interest levels, so you have to keep moving that forward. So how do you market this? How do you energize? And we basically used whatever we could within the church, and everybody's got newsletters. We have coffee hours, and we basically did a lot of community forums where we invite the public, and we had a lot of community forums on environmental issues to get both our members and the wider community involved. But we did a lot of partnering along the way during this Green Sanctuary accreditation. Wild Earth Guardians, Trout Unlimited. We ended up adopting a section of the South Platte River about 2.5 miles to get our congregation members, get families out there. It was a small thing, but it got people outdoors and got them thinking about the environment. Because that's what we really need to do, is get people thinking about their connection to the environment. So we really took a pretty exhaustive approach, book reviews, book clubs, just about everything we could think of to, okay, how does this work? Water bottles, getting away from plastic water bottles, all this kind of went into the same categories. So part of the process is we actually came up with the Green Sanctuary Covenant. And this was very important as we moved down the road on our journey to where we are now. So we did all of this from 2008 to 2010, got a great buy-in from the congregation, had the Green Sanctuary Covenant. So when we went forward with this $5 million renovation, there was a pretty hardcore group within this church that said, we can't do this renovation unless we do geothermal and solar and really move forward with this. So that really laid the groundwork to move forward into this basic major renovation. And as a result of that energizing before, we were able to get a combination of additional donations, and there were a group of us within the church that made what I call community investment loans to the church, $235,000, 15 years at 1.5% interest. And to me, that is the best investment that I have. But then again, I divested everything out of Wall Street. So we have to start thinking about life beyond traditional financing and returns. We have to do this. It really doesn't matter how much it costs. That should be irrelevant to this thought process. And so with that, I will say goodbye.
Thank you, Tom. Now, let's see. It was important, I thought, that Tom brought up this idea of unlikely allies, that he reached out to organizations that we might not normally think about as helping us, like Trout Unlimited and Ducks Unlimited and some of those, and actually bringing them into the process. I think that's incredibly powerful, and thank you. Okay, so we're going to now bring on Pete Turpening, the retired pastor at United Church of Christ, who has solarized. Interesting story.
Okay. Can I put this on top of that, you think? Or no, I'll put it here. I can see it. Hi, I'm Pete. So, Community United Church of Christ, small church in Boulder, liberal group. Progressive church, one would think would be easier to push some of this stuff, but it's not. And I don't want to, I'll be a little bit more of a downer in that one of the things I'm talking on later is influencing church boards and to do this. And I have to say that I was at a church board last night. There's an idea to have a garden, a community garden with teenagers producing food using the space on the church lawn. So you can imagine the conversation. I mean, church boards are inherently conservative. Even very progressive, liberal, or kind of open-minded people, I think, become more conservative when you put them on a church board, because then they're protecting and taking care of their church in a good way. I mean, this is all good. I mean, suddenly they feel this responsibility. I'm in this building, so I think it can be difficult. And I want you to, the example I want you to, that maybe you could take away from this is, I raise bonsai trees. And if you wire a tree or trim its roots or do something significant to a tree, you don't really do anything else to that tree for about a year. You let it sit, you let it recover, you let the branches grow into the new configuration. That's always, well, for some time now, that's been my model of working with churches. Is that it takes time. People need to get their head around stuff. And you do a radical thing like put on solar panels, and you really can't do anything else for about a year, at least a year. So that's my kind of negative attitude on this at the moment, because I was just at this church board last night, so I'm sorry. I apologize. But we did start, and right away we had to decide if we were going to. So we got a group of committed environmentalists. This is like 2008, 2009, people wanting to do some action. People are saying, what is more important? Just kind of what you were saying at the end there, is that what could be possibly more important than having our church be more aware of this? And so we gathered together and we did think a lot about a name, and we called ourselves the Earth Action Team. And I think it's very important that the pastor, that I was supportive. Not sure it would have gone anywhere if it's difficult if you don't have pastoral support on this. I think that complicates things more, but I was gung-ho, and so I think that helped. And then we started talking, did we really want tangible results? Did we want to see action, or did we want to raise people's awareness and educate people? And were we willing to go forward if all we did was raise awareness and they didn't actually agree to do anything? And we decided we were willing to go forward even if nothing happened tangible. That it was important to have book studies, to do something, to have people witnessing that we were trying to do something. So, and I think that's important, is because you cannot count on, I don't think, you can't count on getting action or tangible results. Now, we were lucky in that we then did start small. We put in compost, trash, and recycling, the three kind of containers. You do little things. You get rid of styrofoam. You get people to agree to do that. And every once in a while there's an event at church and there'll be styrofoam cups, and I'll be like, really? Like, who brought these in? But it happens. It goes back. You go back and forth. But you do these tangible things, and I think that's important. And I was very interested to listen to you guys talk about how, as I understand it, kind of where we ended up too, is that you kind of have to create money from somewhere else. You can't expect the church board to budget money for this. It just didn't work. So we had this idea to put on solar panels. We had a gung-ho guy that he was the accountant for Namaste Solar, so he was their tax accountant. So he had a very strong connection to this solar panel company, which helped. So the president of that company came and talked to the church. But we've talked to the board, and it became fairly obvious right away we weren't going to get money for this, because there was no extra money. They didn't, and if there had been, they weren't willing to commit to that. They weren't convinced it was going to save them money, although it did save them money. So the way we did it was we sold solar panels. So everybody could buy a portion of a solar panel. And we had one fifth grader who bought 1/16 of a solar panel. It was like, or even less than that, 1/50th. I don't know if he put in his allowance. But individuals, and some people put in a lot of money and bought 3 panels, the wealthier people, the people that we brought in. And there were people from outside the church then who started coming to the church who bought panels. So it is true for our church, and I should witness to this, that this built up the church. There were people who were like, what are you doing? But because it didn't cost anything, they were willing to go forward. It didn't cost the church anything. And there were people who came to the church just because we were doing this. I don't know if that's been your experience, but we found that it did provide church growth, which was an unexpected surprise in some ways. And I do, so that's been helpful. So I would say that working with the board, I think you do need to create your own source of funding. And this happened to work quite well. They went on, after I left that position, they went on to try to do solar thermal, which they did succeed, but solar thermal is a lot more complicated, and you can get into problems of saving the hot water, and that didn't work quite right as well, and it involved putting a big pipe across the fellowship hall, and that was a big problem. You wouldn't expect it to be a big problem, but it was a big problem, and that kind of messed that up. So there's all kinds of conflict around this solar thermal, and there still is. It's installed, it's working better, but it's tricky. So you just have, and I think tangible results are having the bins that said that, people see that something is happening. You see the solar panels in the parking lot. You see the reduction in the electric bill, and the church is still breaking even completely on electricity. It's not costing the church to have electricity, which impressed it. And there's a gentleman named Carl who, bless his heart, was a treasurer for the church for years and was very loyal to the church. And if he was up or down on this thing, it was going to go or it wasn't going to go because of Carl. And we finally, and if it was going to cost a nickel, it was not going to go forward. So that was the only way we convinced him. We convinced him that he was going to save church money, and it was going to cost the church nothing. And time for me to go. And so that made the difference. So anyway, I probably could think of more things about this, but so you can talk to me later. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Pete. We're going to bring on Joan Gregerson. Joan Gregerson runs the Green Team Academy here in the Metro Denver area, and her expertise really is building green teams. So we are delighted to share her wisdom with you.
Whoops, I just messed up your screen there. Well, welcome everybody, and you are my dream team. So to be hanging out with people that care about this stuff, that's all I could ever want. So I'm exactly where I want to be. So again, my name is Joan Gregerson. I have a project called Green Team Academy, and the way I ended up doing this is I found out that it's not enough to be passionate. It's not enough to be committed. It's not enough to dedicate your entire life to the environment if you're doing ineffective shit. And that, I know this from personal experience. So when I was 10 years old, my first writing was published. It was a poem about pollution. The first little book that I wrote was about recycling. My dad was a petroleum engineer, so I started working for him when I was 10 years old. And this is back when we used paper. And this was log paper. And so I would have the data, and I would plot the data. And after a while, I noticed a pattern. So no matter how, he'd gone through college, done all this. His job that I did for him was plot the data. You run out of data, you grab a curve, and you draw it to zero. It's like, okay, that's cool. And the next one, very similar. And the next one, you always draw them out to zero. That's just what happens. You can do fuel, you can do water injection, now you can do fracking, but eventually it still goes to zero. So here I was, 10 years old, Dad, what the heck? What the heck have you created? So that was 1970. 1973, energy crisis, cars are lined up at gas stations, people don't have enough gas. And I'm like, what are you guys doing? And he was working at Texaco at that time, and he said, I'm telling them, this is a crisis. And I was like, whew, thank goodness you guys have this under control. So I'm 58. But anyhow, so when I went to college in 1978, I said, I want to study solar energy. I went to University of Colorado, and they said, awesome, we don't have it. And I'm like, you don't have it? What are you teaching? Like, what are you doing? What could all these buildings and people be working on if you're not working on solar, if you're not working on the future? So they said, study engineering. So I did. So I worked in the field of building energy efficiency. So a lot of this stuff that we're looking at here, doing building energy modeling. And again, so I, dedicated my life to this. At one point, we had our second kid, moved to Niwot. No recycling in the town of Niwot. And I'm like, and I'm going back and forth to work by bus. So what am I supposed to do? Like carry my recycling on the bus? Like, I don't understand what's going on here. So I tried getting a recycling center in Niwot. And after 17 years, I did. And this is what I'm talking about. But stupid stuff, because then when I moved away, nothing continued. Because I didn't know, and I think this is a lot of what our educational system, thank goodness I learned that we're the best government and democracy in the world and we're perfect. So that was great to know, except that when you kind of notice things that could be better, I didn't have any skills to do anything different. Well, fast forward a little bit, I got offered a job in Longmont in 2013 to again work at an energy efficiency company. I was very excited about taking this job. And then there was, anybody remember when the rain started? It's a massive flood. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's where I'm just getting ready to move, and it's completely underwater. So I moved there and I was like, all right, I want to be part of the sustainability group. And there wasn't one. And I'd worked for Fort Collins Utilities, where they're very forward, lots of folks from Fort Collins here. So, Denver, Fort Collins, Boulder all had sustainability movements. In Longmont, people were telling me, no, nobody cares in Longmont. And I was like, what? And reaching out to city employees, and they were saying, don't send me an email with the word sustainability. I've been told not to work on that. And I didn't know anything about city council, how any of that stuff worked, never been to a city council meeting in my life, because I had dedicated my life to what I thought was important, right? I thought I was doing the right thing. But what we found out was that there had been a very conservative city council earlier that had told the staff, don't bring sustainability back to us. And that's the way city works. Staff cannot work on things they've been told not to. So I kept trying to make things happen and couldn't get any buy-in. And so I said, you know what? It's a revolution. And so that's what I started a nonprofit called Sustainable Revolution Longmont. And fast forward, we did an Earth Day event. We had 1,200 people come to Boulder County Fairgrounds. The only reason we used that space was because we didn't have any money. And we planned a year and ahead in advance, and they said, well, you can reserve it without a deposit. It's like, well, I guess that's where we'll have it. So we didn't know, I had no experience planning anything bigger than a family birthday party. And we had 70 exhibitors. We started a youth council. The Youth of the Earth was the name of the festival. We had 35 youth exhibitors, performers. We had 35 nonprofits. When everybody was in that space together, it just crushed that myth that no one in Longmont cares about sustainability. You can never say that again, because people on their own volition are there learning from each other. And so over the course of 2 years, we changed the course of the city. After 2 years, they had a sustainability plan, a sustainability coordinator. They'd hired a sustainability consultant. And Longmont was one of the first cities that signed up for that Ready for 100. And when our administration at the national level was pulling out of the Paris Accord, it was cities that were standing up. And Longmont was one of them. When I came back, I was only there for a year and a half in Longmont. When I came back, when they were signing the Ready for 100, city council members were hugging me going, you did this. And I think that is the fallacy. It was like the dancing guy, that I was okay being the crazy one, whatever it takes to get up there. But it was, so what I have discovered is that my focus as an engineer, as a problem solver, to build things, to build better things, was limited. And as so many people talked about, that we're part of this interconnected web, what I now know is that if you build community, you can do anything. If you don't, anything that you try may fail. One of the more recent engineering experiences I had was reviewing measurement and verification reports for large energy efficiency projects, which often did not deliver. And think how depressing that is. Here's my life work. We convince people to do it, and they're not seeing the results. And the reason was there was no attention to community, to culture. So what I do now is I mentor people who want to start to be part of that solution. So I would say people that want to start projects, go ahead, do a project, but what you're really doing is building community. Because a lot of times, as people said, your projects can fail. Somebody can throw up something that stops you. And if your focus is a project, you're going to get depressed. But if you build community, you have that resilience, you can move forward. And so with the Green Team Academy, one of the things that I do is I teach storytelling, and how what I learned in the energy efficiency world was we could give people reports all day about how they could change, like a school district. As soon as one school district did it, though, they're like, those guys did it? Well, I guess anybody can do it. Heck yeah, that's what we've been trying to tell you. Anybody can do it. So this is a very important thing, to grab these stories, all these stories that we're hearing here, to grab them and keep them in your back pocket, because certainly somebody's going to say, you can't do that. And you're going to go, oh no, Tom did it. Or, any of these other people that you just heard, well, they did it over here in Boulder, this place. So one of the things that I'm working on is something called the Earth Week Virtual Summit. I left a few of these around. There's a website, earthweeksummit.com. I've interviewed 21 different people who have done incredible things. Just got off a call this morning with a kid in Uganda who is teaching youth to, as part of the UN Biodiversity Convention, to understand that and create job opportunities. So he's telling me about Isaac, who became a beekeeper, and Irene, who started growing her own food and has her own business. So this idea of storytelling is so important because it is the way that people will transform. So I have lots of free resources over at greenteamacademy.com. I have a podcast. Love to interview you on my podcast and share your story. And thank you so much for everything that you're doing, and I really appreciate it. And thanks, David, for bringing me.
Okay, I took away from this action, patience, it's a long sprint, and belonging, this idea of belonging. So what we're going to do, we have a little time. We're going to pass the microphone, popcorn style. Give us your one-word summary of what you learned in this session.
Persistence.
One word. Solar.
Attitude.
Groundwork.
Wow.
Community.
Village.
Creative.
Begin.
Hope.
Hope. Patience.
Encouraging. Reverence.
Action.
Dedication.
Communication.
Joy.
Persistence.
Focus.
Integrity.
Stories.
Community.
Possibilities.
Connection. Tired.
Keeping going.
Team. Vision.
Stop doing ineffective shit.
Crowdfunding.
Inclusion.
Innovation.
Followership.
Persistence.
Community.
Determination.
So, we're going to take a short 5-minute break, and then we will reconvene. Thank you.